I guess from your background, growing up in northern Sri Lanka, um, what were the opportunities like when you were growing up? Was moving to Australia? I know when you were 4 years old, but um, why the move? Why particularly the move to Canberra as opposed to Sydney? I know your partner grew up in Sydney, and you guys moved to Canberra. Talk us through, the early days there. I'm sure you couldn't remember a hell of a lot of it, but
I'm super impressed with your research. I feel like I'm having an interview with ASIO. Um, you know, um, so I left Sri Lanka when I was 4 years old, and I think the reason we left was because of the civil war, that was taking place,
right,
right, in Sri
okay,
Lanka between the sort of Tamils at the time that were living in the north and east, and then the Sri Lankan government. And so I don't have many memories, unfortunately. I've gone back a few times since, and obviously tried to reconnect, with
that
the
was the early
country.
'80s, 1980s would have been.
Yeah, it was 82
Okay,
when we arrived. So yeah, 4 years old back then, and we came straight to Canberra because that's where my dad had an older brother who was working there at the time, and then he managed to get a job, with the aviation authority and so forth. So I think for us, mate, I don't have many memories.
mm,
That is something that I think I want to rectify, particularly for my children, right? To have a bit of a connection. Obviously, we're very fortunate to be in Australia, but also, fortunate to have a connection and an ancestry with Sri Lanka. And I think that's something to explore. Have you ever been to Sri Lanka before?
I haven't. No, I've never been
Oh,
to India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan. I think their
yeah.
places definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think you'd love Sri Lanka. I think it's there's just everything there. And in fact, what I've heard is on the east coast of Sri Lanka, where there are massive waves, there are a bunch of Aussies who have set up surf
Oh,
camps.
really?
Yeah, so it's not a bad place to go.
Yeah. I used to do a fair bit of that when I was younger, but I don't know how I'd go now. I'm about 120 kilos or so. I just stick to the gym gym floor, but
Yeah.
definitely love getting in the water, love swimming. So yeah, but I'm a lot of my friends and family that have been over there, yet they come back and don't know anyone that hasn't avoided Delhi belly. Have you got any tips or strategies yourself on avoiding that? Imagine bottled water is one of them, but yeah, is it hard to avoid that kind of thing over there in Sri Lanka as well?
Yeah, Sri Lanka is not too bad. I think Delhi belly is much more, I find, in India. You tend to find that because of the sort of the amount of food that isn't necessarily clean or available in sort of clean sanitary conditions that you can choose as street food. For us in Sri Lanka, it's not too bad. I think most people will tend to eat out of hotels and pretty decent quality restaurants and that kind of thing. So I think I'm slightly biased, right, when it comes to Sri Lanka versus India. So I think I know where I'd be holidaying.
I think a lot of the what you talked about there, a lot of the context in which you talked about growing up, well, not growing up, but I guess your initial start in life was in Sri Lanka, northern Sri Lanka.
Mm.
Um, and we talk about the classic definitions of what it is to be, mentally strong or mentally tough, and dealing with things like stress and pressure and all those things that we as humans experience on a day-to-day basis as we progress through life. um, do you think that your initial entry into the world and the circumstances with which you were brought into the world was a nice, you could say, introduction to stress, pressure, and that was the initial stages of your development as a person into a career in psychology, or was that something that came a bit later on in life?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, right? I think, what do they say that, sort of 70, 80% of your personality is formed in that first sort of 9 or 10 years, right?
Yeah.
So, obviously there was some element of, those early years playing a role. I think when you're a young immigrant child and you're coming into a new country, having to learn a new language, I think all of those things obviously teach a sense of resilience, right? And adaptability, right, to new situations. I think it was more my parents, right? Sort of watching them and seeing them. I think, as kids at that age, we all learn through osmosis in lots of ways,
Yeah.
right? So we're kind of absorbing and hearing even conversations that parents were having as they were trying to work themselves out, right? As sort of adults. And I think that would have all had an impact.